Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Alpine Stories Winter Series. This one is on diversity and inclusion and put together by our very fantastic WAAC member, Tselane Mead, and very good friend of mine. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm not normally the one who introduces, I'm normally the one behind the scenes, but just to tell you a little bit about us in case you are not familiar with the Women's Alpine Adventure Club. We started a few years ago with the goal to make high mountain sports and alpine pursuits accessible to women. And we've had some amazing winter meets. We started with the summer meet, which is the picture in the middle. And the picture on the left is our winter meet that we did in Hempstead last January before all the COVID time. So we hope that you are enjoying tonight's, and maybe you'll join us for some of our other Alpine Stories series. And when we are able, we hope that you join us for a meet, whether you are already into alpine sports or you're interested. Certainly a lot of the people on our meets, it was their first time in the alpine environment, learning to put crampons on, learning to use ice axes, etc. So it is for everybody. The next thing is just a little bit of housekeeping. So during the presentation, we find it the best for our speakers if everybody can leave their videos and their mics muted, so they can focus on sort of sharing the information. If you've got questions along the way, feel free to add them into the chat. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, same deal, put them in the chat below. The lovely Jenny and I will be fielding those, and there will be a question and answer session at the end of the talk. So whether you are feeling shy and you just want us to ask your questions for you, put them into the comments, or if you would like to, and Jenny will go over this again later, raise your hand and you can come on screen, turn your camera on and join the discussion. We really hope that the contents of tonight's talk creates a discussion and hopefully creates some ideas for how we can move forward. Just a couple other things. We will be recording this. So if you do want to come on video later with the questions and answer session, just know that we are recording it and we're going to be sharing it through our website publicly. Okay, so without further ado.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you with us. We're really excited to host this slightly different for us Alpine Stories session. And the idea of this is Tselane's going to give a presentation, and she's done some fantastic research and talked to loads of amazing people to try and open up a discussion about diversity and inclusion in high mountain sports. So Tselane she's going to give a little bit of an intro for herself, but she is from Sheffield and is an emergency nurse and also a qualified ski instructor. She's kind of developed her own mountaineering skills, and we've absolutely loved having her be a regular contributor for our blog. You might have read her article, Black People Can't Ski, and she's also done some skills, alpine skills sessions for us as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Lani. Do you want to turn on your video and your microphone and we can get going with your talk? And yeah, at the end, if you do have questions and comments, and hopefully this will be a very interactive session, we can go over that at the end as well. So yeah, welcome. Hopefully you can turn your video on. Here you are, hooray, you made it.
I am in that one. Fab, yeah, so great to see so many people online, and let me just double check I've got control of this, Liz. Not yet. So just get over this little technical issue. I don't think I've got control yet, Liz.
We might just need you to say next slide then, because I've tried to hand it over 3 times.
Okay. Okay, so my name's Tselane. I'm a emergency nurse from Sheffield. I grew up in Sheffield, and I mostly climb now in the Peak District, mostly trad at the moment, some bouldering if I'm feeling brave. And in the winter seasons, I work as a ski instructor and emergency first aid responder in the Swiss Alps, which is a fantastic job. I'm also a Black Girls Hike leader, and my involvement so far, as Jenny said, I've been doing some articles for Women's Alpine Adventure Club, and sort of taken on this role, it seems, as diversity lead for the club, which has been fantastic. And so I want to just kind of share some women's experiences, initially to help our club become more diverse and inclusive, but as the project has kind of snowballed, it's turned out to be quite helpful, I think, for lots of other clubs as well. So this talk is really about that. I've interviewed mostly Black women. So whilst this talk is about diversity, I am well aware that this is just one aspect of many aspects of diversity, but I hope to enlighten you with not only my experiences as a mixed race woman, but also with that of other women that are really breaking boundaries within the field. I want to say at this stage as well, I use the term Black, Asian and minority ethnic and people of colour and Black people as sort of interchangeably to describe an underrepresented community. Excuse me. So we have some women joining us online from various different places, some of whom I've actually interviewed, so that's fantastic to see some of you online. So yeah, just a really warm welcome to everyone that's joining us. So next slide, please. So this is really a whistle-stop tour on the topic, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is to try and just do your own research as well. Don't just take my word as gospel, but yeah, please try and do your own research because it is a really important topic, diversity and inclusion. So if you just click these ones through, Liz, we've got my story.
Ronnie, if you want to just give it a try taking over now.
Yep, I think I've got that now, thank you. So yeah, we've got my story, we've got a little bit of UK Black history, some of the interview insights, which will kind of be interspersed within the talk, and some forward steps that we can take. And then at the end, like we said, we'll have a bit of discussion, which I hope can be an open rolling discussion. So some of the women that I've interviewed are as follows. So we've got Carmen, who is the Project One founder, founder of the club. She set up Project One earlier in 2020. It's a fantastic organisation. It's basically dedicated to inclusion and improving increase and uptake of Black and minority ethnic people within the UK climbing scene. Carmen works really hard to improve partnerships with climbing walls and local community groups to sort of look at ways in which we can subsidise costs for young people wanting to get into climbing, and to basically promote diversity within the UK climbing scene for underprivileged young people. We have some insights from Brianne Richardson-Jameson. Brianne's based over in Texas in the USA. She is a climber and route setter. She's actually the first African American woman to bolt, route set and do a first ascent in Texas. So she shares some of the challenges that she's encountered. Bree is also a mother of twins. She skis, she caves, she climbs, she does all sorts. She's also the diversity lead for the Caving Society in the US. We have some insights as well from Kim Taylor. Kim is actually a colleague of mine, a dear friend, but she's also She's a gender studies major and she's a professional ski instructor. So she's got some very interesting insights on gender representation as well. And she's going through the levels of ski instructing in a very tough male dominated sport. Kim's based over in Ottawa in Canada. And then we have insights from 4 lovely ladies. So Delia, Louisa, Natalie, Oldfield Williams and Natalie Reid. They're all part of the Black Girls Hike hiking club. And they've given me some amazing insights into the lived experience of BAME community or BAME women getting into hiking for the first time. So a little bit of my story. So I was born in the UK. My mum is white British and my dad is black South African. Majority of my family is mostly white British, and so I've been very privileged in the sense that I would frequently visit the countryside as I was growing up. But really, it's only been in the last 5 years, I'd say, that the outdoors has been really defining for me. Because it's not actually always been my story. In fact, for many years, I enjoyed a party lifestyle, and probably the closest thing to an outdoor experience was camping at a festival or a canal walk to the pub, which is great and all power to you if you enjoy that. But I did find that living a city lifestyle, I was living in Berlin for years, and I ended up finding inner city bouldering gyms because there's a big scene out there, and I developed a love for bouldering. I found that I enjoyed getting better at it, and through that I developed the great outdoors and experiencing the great outdoors, and that was really an amazing entry point for me to start climbing outside. I kind of started to feel inner peace in my outdoor surroundings. I started to gain confidence over the years. And in fact, I was so passionate about the mountains and being in the mountains that I kind of wanted just to make a way of life for myself in the outdoors. So I found an amazing nursing job in Switzerland, in the Swiss Alps, for a ski school. I learned how to ski and I saw big mountains for the first time. And then since I've just kind of spent winters instructing in the Alps. I actually ended up moving to Chamonix, which is in the French Alps, and spent some time working there. And there I really flourished in my mountaineering, ski touring and climbing skills. And that was actually when I met Lizzie, one of the club founders. And we did our first 4,000 metre peaks together. So we did Weissmies in Switzerland and Gran Paradiso in Italy. There were, well, getting into this scene, there were lots of barriers for me to overcome, namely cost, confidence, and people to feel safe with. I felt like I was able to overcome a lot of those because of the lifestyle that I'd chosen, the job that I had, and also the upbringing from my wonderful mum, who would introduce me to national parks from a very young age. So I kind of had quite a bit of confidence already. But for me, there was also something deeper. And as I took things to new levels in alpine sports, I did start to see, well, I saw less and less women, and especially in these kinds of spaces, and less women of colour, Black women. I often wondered where the Black people were. I would wonder why people would make passing comments about my skin, or why people would just start touching my hair without asking, or asking where I'd come from. And so I did feel uncomfortable because I was the only Black, or often the only woman in these environments. And recently, much more recently, so in 2020, I started to think more deeply on this, and really it was at the time of George Floyd's death, which blew a lot of people's minds last summer, and that got me thinking. I wondered why there aren't a more diverse range of people in the outdoor industry. I started thinking, well, maybe my fellow Black women just aren't interested in being in these spaces. But to be honest, that's simply not true. And some of the things that I actually heard growing up, I believe, can be major stumbling blocks to us as women and women of colour. it can really affect your belief system on some level growing up. And so some of the sexist and racist remarks I would hear were things like Black people can't swim, Black people don't ski, that's a white girl's sport, and you've got balls to do that. And it was just a constant reminder for me of the exclusivity of some of these sports. And so why wouldn't someone like me think that growing up? Because actually there never were pictures of Black people swimming or skiing or doing rad stuff in the outdoors. And you hear something enough times and you start to believe it. So I discovered, after researching a bit further, that there really was something called an adventure gap. And I love this phrase. It's coined, well, I borrowed it from a gentleman called James Edward Mills, and he actually wrote a book on this topic, and he was part of this amazing Denali expedition. So there's a link at the end, you can definitely come and check it out. So let's look at why there is an adventure gap. So around 98% of the BAME community live in the inner city in the UK. So when we think about that figure, actually the lived experiences of many of the BAME community is not in the outdoors. And of the BAME community, of these ethnic groups, so we've got Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Black African. And so, like I said, yeah, the lived experience actually isn't in the outdoors. And I believe, well, the national parks are for everyone. We all pay tax for them. But it's astounding the percentage of the BAME community that actually are able to access national parks. So if anyone got this, it's only 2%. So really the closest experiences for a lot of people to being in the outdoors and being in green spaces will actually be a city park or a green. And it is worth mentioning at this stage, you know, it's not just a race issue, it is a poverty issue as well. But obviously for the moment, we're going to be just focusing on why we see a lack of Black and brown faces in green spaces. So, do we underplay Black history in the UK? At the time of George Floyd's death, I heard a lot of comments being branded around like, we don't live in a racist country and the UK isn't as bad as the US for racism. And whilst maybe this is true on some level, we also know that history smashes these biases in the face. And we only have to look at the Race Relation Act of 1965 to realise that the UK history has been just as murky as that in the US when it comes to racism. And this relatively recent act, recent legislation was put in place to address the racial discrimination in the UK, but it came quite late on. At the time, Black people were being excluded from accessing social spaces, from going to places like parks. And apart from the fact that actually there was no time to go to national parks, to nice big open spaces, a lot of Blacks would have maybe 3 or 4 jobs. So there simply wasn't the time. There were restrictions on staying in hotels, on going to theatres, using swimming pools, buying houses, and using public transportation. So actually, if we think about the swimming pool thing, if we go back to the first initial stumbling block that I heard, Black people can't swim, well, they probably couldn't for a long time. For generations, they probably weren't actually allowed in swimming pools, or they were restricted from accessing them. So you start to see where these ideas have come from. It was probably very isolating and difficult for Black people to integrate at that time. And so they would often really stay in their communities for support. And at this time, we have to realise that the Black community had a completely different, they had to prioritise a different hierarchy of needs and, well, compared to their white counterparts. So these issues are deep systematic issues, they're deep rooted, and we still have to work hard today to overcome them. And at the same time that Black people were being restricted and not even allowed into public parks, there was this sudden renaissance of mountain climbing. So we saw a new upper middle class climbing scene led mostly by white men in the 1950s, and really the whole institution of our climbing and mountaineering history is built on was built at quite a racist time. And so the climbing community was probably as undiverse as you could get during that time. And really the heritage can be quite deeply white and perhaps quite unwelcoming. But there is enough room for everyone. And Brianne actually made a really interesting point that I hadn't thought of before. So I hope this video will work. Let's see if it works.
Oftentimes, our people, when we think of being outside in nature, we're thinking about the fact that most of the time we were forced to be outside in nature. It wasn't by choice. And so, whereas I feel like white folks are very quick to think about recreation in nature, you have to realize that minorities that's not always our first go-to, thing that we think of. It's usually, what our ancestors have had to undergo in nature and how it wasn't by choice. We have been so far removed, from nature. And when we look at our ancestors prior to, things like, enslavement and, oppression, we were just as outdoorsy as everyone else.
Yeah.
So, and I say we to include every minority, because every individual minority has its own amazing story about how it connected with how their people connected with nature.
So we actually have quite a lack of cultural history when it comes to outdoor green spaces due to not having been allowed in these spaces for generations. And so it's easy to understand why it might be uncomfortable for people to get involved in mountain environments. There have been systemic injustices that have been endured over generations, and it does take a toll on a people. And so you can see why Black and Asian and minority ethnic people have lost the connection with nature, or that it hasn't been able to fully establish itself. And our communities, our culture, and our experience has been the local park. And so the outdoor industry kind of needs to understand that for the Black community, we're only just beginning to learn what the outdoors is, because for many years it's been the inner city. So how can we get the outdoor industry or alpinism to catch up? And so here is Kim, that specialises in gender studies. Here are her thoughts.
There's nothing to catch up to. It's not behind. That's literally just what society is at right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that the outdoor industry has less representation than other sports. It's that lack of representation is in everything. It's in, like film, movies, so many things. And so I just thought then that also means the change can't just happen in our sports. It has to happen. It's a bigger change than just in the sports industry that has to happen.
So whilst we have this big societal change that has to happen, we also have to see that the main issue is actually quite hard to understand. And I found that during my research, there's no real statistics, there's no real data. So it is quite a hard topic to understand. And this was highlighted to me when speaking with Carmen. We were discussing the issues regarding the climbing scene and how it can be quite unwelcoming at times.
We haven't got any statistics. How can we talk about something that we can't fully understand? We're at a really hard starting point, I think. Individuals like us, at least. Probably some market research. This is the thing. It's getting surveys out there. It's finding out genuinely from women what does appeal to them and what doesn't. What is it that made you try climbing? Was it that you were introduced by a friend, or was it that you saw an advert on TV? When you can figure that out, again, it's all of this. Once we can figure out the cause of something, then we can create a solution. So I would say we just have to start asking these questions as widely as possible. You know, we've got organizations like the BMC, ABC, they've got a huge connection and huge reach to all the climbing communities. We could be doing surveys, we could be asking about all of this, the ethnic makeup of the groups, all of it. And I'm sure there are surveys and such that exist, but just not about this. So if we want to invite people in, we need to change our marketing. We need to go to different places. We need to go through different people, and it needs to look different from what it is right now, because what it is right now, like, is enough for a certain criteria of people. It's not all encompassing. So yeah, until people realize that, because that's the thing, it's like, well, but we post that there's this meetup and we post that there's this, but who is it going to? It's going to your white climby following, no one else. So when are you going to be getting new people coming in from what, the one black woman's supposed to bring every black woman she knows with her? Or, you know, that's the kind of thing. If you're only advertising to your own circle, it's never going to change.
So from that, I gleaned we need some market research, for sure. And like I said, that was really highlighted to me when gathering all this together, because a lot of the information I gathered was purely anecdotal. We need marketing by big organisations and councils that it could do with being more spread more widely and to more diverse groups of people, and frankly in a different way to how it's being presented at the moment. We need the outdoor industry to be adequately represented, and that's on all levels, from the highest level down, from the top of the board, with people from diverse backgrounds, with women that understand, with people that understand women, with people that understand women of colour and women of religion, that kind of thing. And the industry needs to be way more inviting. So again, taking into account things like cultural differences, different faiths, different backgrounds, skill levels, everything. I do believe that it's the responsibility of everyone to look into these areas individually, and actually it may well be down to government to make some reforms or improve things like transport links into green spaces, or setting up diversity panels, panel boards with like patrons on to help organisations make change and make decisions. So how can we make the outdoor industry more inviting? So we know that being in green spaces and national parks are a fantastic entry point for more adventurous pursuits in the mountains. And so it's really about getting people out of the inner city and into a space where they feel comfortable. So organised events can be really helpful with this. And that's purely because many women starting out, they might not have the confidence to do something completely on their own. Projects like Black Girls Hike have been instrumental in supporting women, supporting Black women into getting into the outdoors. And it can be the first step for many women. And Black Girls Hike is pretty much what it says on the tin. When speaking with Rianne, the club founder, we discussed how national parks can actually be really intimidating for a lot of women, especially when there are people there that perhaps don't look like you, or you don't have the right equipment or skills. It's hard to pathfind. Maybe you don't have the right shoes, the right clothes, or transport. You might not have transport, that kind of thing. So there's lots of reasons, but Brianne sums up quite nicely how important it is to find your crew of people.
I feel like the question of our safety is sometimes amplified when we are the only people like us in an environment. And I think that you just have to find it within yourself to push forward. If it's something that you really want to do, it's okay to try to find a squad to do it with, find a group of people that are like-minded, find folks that you can trust, and, explore those endeavors with them. I think that safety is like a really big thing. Being in the rock climbing world and the caving world, and knowing that, you know, a lot of these things that we do, mountaineering, you know, I'm sure, you know, it's really, really white male dominated. And I think that that's okay to step into those spaces alone if you have the confidence to do so. But for women who necessarily weren't raised like that, or they just don't have that within them to feel comfortable in those environments, I think that finding others that they can do it with would be really important.
So here are some really successful projects. And they've been really good entry points for a lot of people, underrepresented communities. And I guess it's worth mentioning at this stage, you know, cost of these activities is a major socioeconomic barrier. And so the importance of subsidised spots for underprivileged communities is so important. And so projects like Project One and snow camps are fantastic because they do exactly that. For example, snow camps, they actually take underprivileged children from inner city areas. They provide trips to indoor snow domes in the UK, and then they also do talent scouting and help build people up in the levels of ski instructing, and they can finally get out into the Alps as well, and once they start to make a bit of a business or a living for themselves. There's also Climb XR, which is a black climbing group based in London. There's Flock Together, which is a black and minority ethnic bird watching group based in London as well. There's Climbers Like Me, which is a fantastic project I actually had the privilege of being part of, and they were fantastic because they helped to give voices to women that were underrepresented. So women from various religious backgrounds, paraclimbers, different body sizes, women with different gender identities, all sorts. So yeah, there are some really great projects out there. But unfortunately, not everyone thinks that these projects are as amazing as I do. And this is some of the backlash that some of the groups will get, that perhaps don't understand the need for safe spaces for minorities. And this kind of behaviour, these kinds of comments can be really quite draining for club members to have to deal with. But actually we have to realise that this is exactly the kind of behaviour that makes us realise that we need these groups. We need to support minorities. And also the main point is actually these groups exist out of necessity, because people don't feel like their voices are being heard, or they feel like they're not able to adequately or safely integrate into these spaces. So it's important to build skills in a safe environment before people feel then safe to move on to something more adventurous like climbing or mountaineering. And this was highlighted to me from the conversation with the Black Girls Hike Women when we were discussing gaining confidence in a new activity like hiking. Because sometimes without the support of peers or without feeling completely safe, it might take you absolutely years to build up confidence in outdoors pursuits.
And before, I'd be just too scared of getting lost.
Yeah, that is a major barrier you've picked up about map reading skills and getting lost and knowing where you're going. It's like, yeah, it's a learned thing, isn't it? And if you haven't accessed that with someone or been taught how to do that, then it's definitely, there's not many women who walk on their own.
So are we truly welcoming to all backgrounds, faiths, body sizes, disabilities and cultures? Does it matter what you wear? Do we understand the nuances of a group of women? And are we allowing women to show up authentically? Here are some interesting thoughts about dress code in the outdoors.
I always used to think that like kind of outdoors was like this kind of
I don't know, like this older kind of man with like the hat and like the small tiny glasses and like the car keys and everything.
Red gaiters. That's
Yeah,
the red gaiters.
the gators. Oh my gosh. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I like fashion. That's also a barrier as well, isn't it? I didn't really think about it, but to me, like, it felt like I was a bit like, oh, I stick out, like, because I stick out anyway because I'm black, but I stick out as well because I don't want to like wear just black or I want to wear like a pink one, but like also like there's a lack of colors for women. I've learned in terms of shops, so there'll be pink, there'll be blue, and there'll be black.
Day before, thankfully the shops were still open. I went to TK Maxx and found a pair of brown Merrell walking shoes. They weren't even boots, they were kind of almost just up to the ankle bone, not even quite mid. And they were brown. Like, that is not a color I would have ever gone for, but there was nothing else, and they were in my size. They fit and it was so comfortable, and it was slightly waterproof. I was just like, man, I'm just gonna look like I felt like I was gonna, like you said, Louisa, fit into that stereotype of those shit brown shoes and a pair of black waterproof trousers, because that's what I had. And I was like, do you know what, that's just, it's gonna have to be. And actually they sufficed for the thing that I needed. They were not expensive, and they, you know, they did the job. But I was just like, I just did not want brown. But then actually when I came home, another girl who I bumped into on the train on the way there, she also had brown. I said, oh, you must be going to the Black Girls Hike. I said, because we're both wearing these shit brown shoes, so we must be going to the same place. She was like, yeah. But she pointed out the fact that she got brown shoes was because actually the mud, and actually it would be easy to kind of disguise it. And she was 100% right. So I'm glad I've got shit brown shoes.
So the perceptions of Louisa and Natalie of what the outdoors looked like were quite a clear image there. So really women want to get involved in something that looks appealing, it seems. But unfortunately, the Alpine scene doesn't deliver very well on that.
I think that climbing and alpinism and mountaineering, you know, this umbrella of sports just has never been targeted to us well, or in a way that is actually appealing. Like, don't just make everything pink and go, right, women, come on to a mountain. That's like, you know, it's not going to work. People are going to go, I don't want to be part of your sexist bloody regime. What is this?
And as a side note, since we're talking about culture, I actually found that all the women actually mentioned managing black hair in the outdoors. And whether you think it's a small issue or not, it's still an important nuance to maybe have a bit of understanding on. Natalie explains how being part of a Black hikers group of women who understand nuances like hair helped to put some women at ease and went a long way in helping women feel seen and understood.
It was just little things. So like things like, for me, like getting your hair wet and having a conversation with somebody about somewhere that I went and getting my hair wet was like comedy for so many people around me. Obviously you laugh about it yourself, but you know, like, this is serious. Like, I do not want to get my hair wet, because you know that situation after the hair is wet is long. But I understand for a lot of women, just sweating it out is an issue. They want to do the thing, they want to do the activity. We know that for them it's a big thing, but if it was another like type of group, not everybody within that group is going to be as understanding or tolerant.
And afterwards, I've linked in a couple of really good resources. So there's the Melanin Basecamp and the Halo Collective, both fantastic websites that sort of talk about black hair discrimination and managing black hair in the outdoors. Oh, sorry, there's one more clip about hair.
I'm like, okay, I'll just be responsible and do a protective style, and which is going to end up in braids, right? And then, you know, inevitably, like, it often happens when I'm, you know, kind of the only person of color in the room, I'm going to get someone who says, can I touch your hair? Oh, that's so cool. How'd you do that? And you know what? Ask those questions, because if it makes you feel more comfortable being around folks of color, then, you know, all the better. Because it shouldn't be like this thing where we're like exoticized, right?
So I also managed to have a little bit of a conversation with Zara Mahmood. Zara is, if you're on Instagram, she's the hill walking hijabi on Instagram. She gave some really interesting insights into things to consider as perhaps an outdoor instructor, or if you're hiking with someone or climbing with someone for the first time and they are a practicing Muslim. So Zara mostly hikes in Lomond area, in the Trossachs. As you can see, there are some, I don't know if everyone can read that, but there are some religious aspects to definitely consider. So practicing Muslims will be praying perhaps for five times a day. So allowing time for prayer is really important. And also for hijab wearing women, if they're doing activities like climbing or caving, for example, where they need to wear a helmet, it's actually really important to think about a private space for women to change a hairstyle so that they can get a helmet on over their head. And ultimately, it doesn't hurt to contact people beforehand just to see if there are any religious or cultural aspects that you can take into account. So, representation. So most of the women, in fact, all of the women I spoke to, we all agreed that representation was vital at every level, whether it's at the very top of the board, influencing big decisions, or having hike leaders or leaders, instructors at that level, or just simply being a part of a club with your peers, with people that you can relate with. And we've come a really long way with regards to gender representation in alpine sports, especially with sports like skiing. And so speaking to my colleague Kim, she gave really good insight into why gender representation and support is important and why it is changing on a wider scale within the ski industry.
It's just a mirror to society, like that's very obvious. And yeah, so more and more women are in ski movies now, are out on the mountain, are instructors, so that's awesome. But when we talk about people of color, even people with disabilities, just people who ski differently, people with different bodies, there's just such a huge underrepresentation. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And just this idea of, even for me growing up, never having a female trainer, never seeing a level 4 woman, it almost just makes you just don't think about that. You just don't think that that's a direction I can take because I haven't seen it yet.
So it's probably going to take a long time before we are adequately represented. Women as a whole, but especially those of Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And representation in the outdoor industry, I see it as really, it's like a hyper exposure of what is really being reflected in society. And we have to remember that we can't make a truly inviting environment unless it's represented from the highest level down. And, you know, it's not about tokenism. It's about truly giving people of colour especially opportunities to flourish and perform to the best of their abilities, supporting and giving as a platform. And I have to say, as part of my journey, my biggest thing was self-doubt within alpine sports. And I've sort of been able to pinpoint that because whenever I was out climbing or skiing or mountaineering, I feel a pressure to perform, and I feel these additional eyes on me because of my skin colour, and this feeling that I'm not just representing myself, but every other Black woman. And perhaps it's unfair of me to think that people would make assumptions based on one Black woman's performance. But I do also wonder if people do apply these sort of sweeping assumptions to minorities. I do have to remind myself and be kind to myself, because at the end of the day, it's all just about having fun. And so really trying to quieten that little voice within myself is so important, because at the end of the day, like I said, the outdoor community, we're all just there to have fun and enjoy the space. So starting small with groups like Black Girls Hike, Black Trail Runners, Project One are really important to help close the adventure gap. And when we look at the Women's Alpine Adventure Club, so our club, potential collaborations with these other grassroots movements, with these clubs that are solving social injustices and helping underprivileged communities or young women, that can be a great opportunity for us to help to springboard these movements, to see if there is anyone that might want to get into bigger outdoor spaces and do mountain pursuits. So it's really about giving people the opportunity. And people that want to support women of colour in the outdoors, we need to make sure that these efforts aren't contrived or disingenuous. This is a really trendy topic right now, and it can be really hard to discern who genuinely cares. But ultimately, the conversations and the arena will improve when we are part of the conversation. So there is also a bigger issue, and this one's close to my heart, because it's so vital that everyone has an opportunity to get into outdoor spaces. It's vital for our health and well-being. And when we think about global pandemics, we immediately think about coronavirus, but there is a pandemic of mental illness and mental health problems. So being inclusive and encouraging is just so vital for communities. Not only this, but we want people to be involved in their natural surroundings. We need people to see what's happening in their natural world, because once people see that glaciers are melting and that there's no that the snowfall on the ski slopes is becoming less and less, and plastic's being washed up on shores and species are becoming extinct, we've got quite a major problem going on in our world today with regards to the environment. So we need to welcome new groups if we have any chance of getting people participating in their natural environment. And an interesting point as well is to consider that when we look at the direction of general population demographics, so in the future, not too distant future, census bureaus are actually predicting that the world will be a majority minority. So as our world grows increasingly multicultural, we actually need people of all races and ethnicities to be stewards for their natural environment and to protect the environment. And I find this interesting because when we go back to our first fact of one of the first facts, so 2% of BAME community using national parks, well, these outdoor spaces that are currently being dominated by a homogenous kind of group of upper middle class white people is going to be, that's posing quite a problem, because if we want to preserve our natural spaces for future generations, it's actually going to need to be a joint effort. So moving forward, the responsibility really lies then with people that are dominating these spaces to prepare and be welcoming. Ultimately, we don't want there to be a need for these exclusive groups like Black Girls Hike or Black Trail Runners, whatever it might be. But unfortunately, at the moment, society is just not quite there. Also, another point to consider is that we kind of need people to get into these outdoor sports because it's fantastic for our sports. So sports like climbing, it pushes the sport forward when we've got more and more people involved from different diverse backgrounds, because actually we never know who the next Molly Thompson-Smith might be or Sophia Dannenberg. So it does push our sports forward, which is great. And finally, it's important for the outdoor community to remember that we're not an unwelcoming community. We are, on the whole, very welcoming as an outdoor community. We are generally quite liberal and we care about the environment, we care about others. We're not racist as a people, but the BAME community or minorities and underrepresented people don't necessarily always feel that way. And something I love that Brianne said is that interpretation always trumps intention. And we've just got a few final comments from Carmen about how we move forward.
Everyone's mind has been blown recently, I feel like, in one way or another, in relation to it. We're being educated, white people are certainly being educated. How do we translate that into something tangible and into change? I don't know. Maybe we need time to process it, and then the ideas will come. As much as everyone wants immediate change, this is immediate action. This is action. It might not seem like much is happening, but there is things happening. The conversations are going on, and just because the whole world isn't sharing its achievements doesn't mean that it's stopped, you know. And I think that there's this sort of idea that everyone's not talking about it anymore. Well, no, people aren't posting on the internet anymore, but it's still happening. We're still doing stuff. We're doing this right now.
Definitely. And yeah, so that's kind of it, really. So I hope you enjoyed the talk and hearing the perspectives of these different women, and I've just tried to pull together as many perspectives as possible. So I hope it's been interesting and perhaps insightful. Maybe you've taken away one or two things, even if it's just about black hair. But yeah, thanks for listening. But yeah.
Great, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Oh, do you want to just go through your thanks to slide, Tselane, or should we just leave it up?
We're just going to leave that up.
Sure. So yeah, I was just going to start with saying a massive thank you to you and all of these people on the screen, because it was a massive amount of work for you to do alongside your normal day-to-day activities, and I find it really, really valuable and really insightful, and it was great to pull together so much in a 45-minute slot. Like we said, I think we could have done a whole series on talks just around diversity, you know, because like you said, we've only touched on one element of that. And I just want to kind of, you know, say as Women's Alpine Adventure Club, we want to make Alpine experiences more accessible to all women. We know that there's a gap in women in the Alpine environments, and that's what we're here to achieve and try to kind of level up, I suppose. And we recognise that there is a real lack of diversity within our club membership, and also the kind of women that we're taking on these meets. So we'd love to reach out, and I guess this is part of this discussion. I mean, there's floods of comments coming in, Tselane. I don't know if you can see about how amazing your talk was. And I think what we love as Women's Alpine Adventure Club is how can we improve things? What can we do to make things more accessible and more inclusive for women of minority backgrounds, even if it's really practical things that we're not thinking of, and yeah, just take people's opinions on why are there less women of minority backgrounds in the Alpine environment. What can we do to achieve that? I will acknowledge that there was a little bit of chat in the chat about women's and men's clothing colours, and that is a separate issue but a very real one all the same. So thank you to everyone that was debating that, because that's what this is about, opening up those conversations. So if anyone has got a question or a comment, if you'd like to write it in the chat, that's great, and I can kind of open that up to the floor or ask Tselane in person, or if you'd like to come on and make your own comment or question, please do raise your hand, and then I can invite you to you know, open your video. So, and I just like to remind people that, you know, to be kind and have productive discussions as well. So I've just seen that there is a question from Dave. I thought I saw one. Oh yeah, he says, how about being introduced to the outdoors at school? Was that something that you were exposed to in school? And I think we all know about the role of outdoor education, and the fact that there are problems within that at the moment, and the huge important task that has in introducing children from different backgrounds to the outdoors. What was your experience there?
My experience, it was just, yeah, we had things like D of E, so yeah, Duke of Edinburgh, and trip, like just residentials and that kind of thing, which was great. It was just not something I was interested in at that time, at that age. And I know that, I don't know if Natalie Reid's still on, but she had some interesting experiences and said that, you know, when she was, I don't know, Natalie, are you there? Do you want to hop on at all?
I am. I'm here.
Yeah, because you were talking about D.O.V., weren't you, and caving, and that was your kind of first.
Yeah.
That
was my in.
Yeah. Yeah.
At, secondary school. So yeah, we went caving. So it was basically a school journey. We went to the Peak District.
Yeah.
And that was my in, and I really enjoyed it. But actually, probably from then into adulthood, I probably didn't do much in between, and was actually a bit of a city girl.
Yeah.
And just didn't do the whole country walking or anything like that. And I don't know if that's because of family influence, or not having that influence from within family, or not moving within those circles. So when I did get to uni, I think when my circle of friends started to evolve, I feel that I did kind of branch out and try lots of different things, not just in terms of like visiting, you know, the British countryside, but just in terms of various activities that maybe I wouldn't have tried ordinarily. So yeah, I think it depends on what it is you do in life, and kind of who you decide to, you know, who your circle of friends are at any given time, as to what you're influenced into trying.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And we know that within teenage girls as a whole, there's a massive drop off in physical activity, isn't there, over the teenage years, because become interested in different things or don't feel comfortable with bodies and stuff. And I wonder whether that has a role in traditional roles of Black women, minority women, whether, you know, that there's that expectation of actually this isn't what we do at this age, or I'm not sure if anyone would like to jump in on that at all, or share your views. Tselane, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of that thing that we were saying, you know, if through the generations, if you've not had people getting into like in the outdoors, or you've not had family that are outdoorsy or whatever, then it's not, again, it's like it's not something you would consider necessarily as a kind of either way of life or as a regular, as a regular activity.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
and I think it's how we, you know, because people might be introduced to the outdoors at school, outdoor education, D.O.V., that kind of thing, and then move away from it, like you were saying, Natalie. And I guess it's how we as an industry, as a club, bring people back to it if they want to be brought back to it. Obviously it's not for everyone, and that's fine. We don't want to be cramming alpine sports down anyone's throat, but I wonder whether there's some kind of, and something that Carmen said really struck a chord with me, of how we're advertising things, and our events, our talks, our things like that, we're just accessing the same little kind of bubble almost. And how do we get out there, how do we access these communities? And I feel like that's the crux of the matter for us, and a big stumbling block for us as a community, I suppose. Yeah.
Personally, if I could just say, I think, because I'm having the same issue in trying to reach my community in the yoga area, in the yoga field, and I think you have to reach, especially if it comes to trying to reach younger people, if you can get their parents, that's a way in. You have to get to the parent sometimes to get to the child. If you're not able to kind of access the child, it's quite strange, but I think that's a way that it can work. It has worked for me.
Mm.
So that's something to think about, depending on the age, I guess, of the child, and I guess if they're teenagers, then the influence of the parent on the child, because there might not be much.
And I think Michaela's just made a comment in the chat about how, as a DofE instructor herself, she's looking at how to keep that continuity going, and how actually these kind of grassroots communities, that's a great stepping stone, isn't it, to find out what's, you know, what works for you after after you've had your experience.
That's it. And I think, you know, as I kind of tried to pull together from the talk, it's like a multi kind of reason. There's loads of different reasons why things will be appealing to someone, and especially for teenagers, you know, if their kind of idea of what the outdoors is like a certain look, there's a certain like way that you're supposed to look, and they don't really fit into that, then that can be quite off-putting. They'd be like, well, why would I want to continue hiking if I have to like wear these really annoying like shit brown shoes or whatever. So yeah, and I think so getting leaders and instructors from various different backgrounds is key, is really key. But it's just going to take a long time.
Yeah, it is, you know, it's longevity.
Can I jump in and just add to it? Because it's absolutely right that finding people, and where do we find the new people, right? That's the issue. But this is where it comes back to making sure that your team and everyone that works for your company or organization is diverse, because those people have the answers. You know, there is going to be someone that grew up on a council estate. If you've got a diverse group of people in your team, there is going to be someone from the complete opposite end of the spectrum as well. And so that's how you branch out, and that's how you find the ways of reaching new people, is by having those type of people as part of your team, you know. And so it really is so important to just diversify everything. If that makes
definitely. And I think if we're thinking about alpine mountaineering, there's a smaller field, isn't there, you know, to start with, and I think in my experience working in mountaineering, in the outdoors, we've got a huge base of kind of indoor climbers now, and I find that super exciting, because in 20 years time they might be the alpinists of the future, you know. And I think that's how we get in and join up and all that kind of thing.
One of the things I want to do with Project One is like now start creating competent and confident climbing children and teenagers, because they're the ones who are going to introduce others, and they're the ones that are going to feel good, and sort of it spreads, doesn't it, you know? So we get ourselves a good core of 2020 starter climbers, and then who knows what's going to happen in 15 years, you know?
Definitely.
It's very exciting to think how different it could be, but we've got a little while to wait until we see those changes, I think.
Yes. And I think we're, as a species, we want change now, don't we? And I suppose we need to think about the long game, which is great. And I do feel like by diversifying our you know, our club and everything like that, it's great. And this is kind of a starting point for us. You know, we recognize that we are 3 middle-class white women running the Women's Alpine Adventure Club, and we, you know, it's been great to have Tselane and other people of different ethnicities feed into that, because like you say, that is so important, and we just want to build on it, really.
And it becomes natural then. It becomes not a how do we get Black people to do this? It's like, we're just doing it because this is what I do. This is my job, and I'm going to put the advert in that paper instead of this one. You know, it just happens naturally. Exciting, hopefully. I'm excited anyway.
Very excited as well. And thank you everyone for your input. It's been really great. I just want to round up by saying that this talk will be available on our website. We'll be putting it up on YouTube and then on our website, so all the resources are there, and I you know, that they are there for you to use. And there's been some comments in the chat about how useful this would be for outdoor instructors, which is great. So maybe we can put together a little resource pack or something for that. And I hope that this will be the starting point for some more reflection and some more kind of thinking and doing about how we can increase diversity in mountain sports. We've got some links at the end as well, which will all be put in, and I wanted to say thank you to Brianna for sharing some resources in our Facebook group as well, so I'll make sure I link to them. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we'll draw things to a close now, because I feel like we could talk about this all night, and I haven't had my dinner yet, and I might get a bit hangry, so we're going to draw that to a close now. So thank you so much, and I'm going to hand back over to Lizzie, who's just going to finish up the evening, but thank you for joining us.
Yeah, a big thank you again to Tselane and everybody who helped her. It's been a fantastic evening, and it's been a fantastic journey, going from coming up with this idea to actually this evening. Just fantastic conversations. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed tonight, maybe you haven't seen some of our other of the Alpine Stories series. These are the next ones coming up. So we've got Tselane Adventures with Michaela Tozek, where she shares her stories about her adventures and lessons learned in the Julian and Chemic Alps of Slovenia. Then we've got Alpine Winter Climbing with Susanna El-Masari, when she'll speak about the power of belief and facing fear in order to achieve your adventure goals. And she's going to share her winter climbing stories from across the globe. And then we're going to end the winter series with Kath James, who is part of our summer series, and she's going to talk about UK winter climbing. So stories of epic days out in her favorite locations in Scotland, and also those rare times when North Wales is in for winter climbing. The sort of standard, you know where to find us, Women's Alpine Adventure Club on Facebook, on Instagram, sign up to the newsletter. That's how you get the most up-to-date information. Some people were asking in the chat, definitely check out our website. As Shani was saying, any of our Alpine Story recording will be put on there with a page, and all the resources are linked. And to sort of go back to that point, Tselane so kindly put together this slide. So just, you know, listing all the sort of organized groups that she mentioned, as well as some websites and films to watch. One that I want to make a highlight of is this Calvert Lakes. So they're a charity based outside of Keswick in the Lake District. And for over 40 years, they've been providing outdoor adventures for children and adults with disabilities. So we talked about diversity within the BANG community, but there's a lot more conversation to be had about disabilities as well. This charity in particular, because of COVID-19, they're on the verge of closure due to lack of funding and guests visiting the charity. So without urgent help, the charity is likely to close. So if you would and are able to help, that's culvertlakes.org.uk, which you can see sort of like down here at the bottom. Go check them out, read the story, help if you can. Also on this slide, we have a few books that are like a good starting point. So the Adventure Gap, which Tselane mentioned a few times, and then Black Faces, White Spaces, which is actually a book that my best friend Clea bought for me just after the George Floyd tragedy, when I was like, what can I do? That was the first book that she sent me, and I would say it's a good read. So Unsteady Wins the Race is a article that Kim has actually written for us. So definitely check out the website. There's lots of great resources. There's going to be even more. And just one other thing, if you're interested in sort of having more conversations about inclusivity in the outdoors, we came across this. So the Outdoor Learning Institute, in association with a few other organizations, one of them quite interestingly being Mosaic Outdoors, which I hadn't heard of before. Their mission is to grow the number of people from Black, Asian, and ethnic minority who engage with outdoor national parks and environment, delivering quality of health and environmental educational benefits. So it's quite interesting to see they've got a series of 10 talks starting, I think that's next week. So if you're interested, go check them out. It's like, you know, we said this could be a 10 series talk. Well, there is one and it's being done. So if you're interested, hop onto that. And thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation. Please, let's continue the conversation, continue to work to, you know, increase diversity, continue to work to, you know, help people with mental health, you know, by getting out into the great outdoors and all the benefits that we feel. So happy that you joined us today. Join us on the website. Let's start to keep the conversation going. And when we have meets, we hope that you all join us. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.